Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fusebox Ask Me Anything. My name is Chris Chowan, and I am the Emerging Technologies Coordinator at Wired Sussex. I'm really excited to be here today, joined by Gareth Evans from LCE Architects. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself in a moment to sort of explain a little bit more about him. But I just wanted to summarise what the AMA is. The idea of this event is that we wanted to talk to some of our different residents and people that we worked with at the Fusebox during this lockdown and discuss some of the projects they're working on and really get some sort of unique insight into their particular industries, because the people we have working at the Fusebox are so diverse. So this particular event, or this particular AMA, we're going to be looking at architecture, the built environment, and Gareth Evans, who, if you'd like to take over now, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thanks for inviting me for the AMA, because I watched the one the other week with Angie and it was brilliant.
Excellent.
So
Thank
really
you.
pleased. So my name's Gareth Evans. I'm a senior designer at LCE Architects in Brighton. We're on Weston Road. Been there since about 2012. Coming from London previously. We're kind of a smallish practice. I guess we've got 12 people in the practice. And since joining, I've sort of made it a point for myself to look to use immersive technology within architecture. It kind of all happened at the same kind of time when the Rift DK1 was coming out at the time when I was joining LC, and that's kind of driven me to look at that side of technology within architecture. So so I've been there about 8 years now.
You sort of carved out your niche there as well.
Within
this area.
Coming into it, it's always been my my interest. Like gadgets, technology has always been my thing, really. And what I try to do is to carve out, like you say, a little niche and make it become my daily purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that way I can incorporate all of the experiments, research, and play into what I do daily. So that's kind of what I've been doing whilst
Well, I just got a couple of hellos in chat, so I want to say hi to everyone. So Darren Etio, Cliff Crawford, Stephen Harvey, and Mark Convey are all here saying hi. So hi guys, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Got to work on that, on talking to people, talking to chat. So I thought a good way to start would be to actually look at sort of your let's look at you as the architect side first, and what some of the projects you've worked on at LCE have involved. Because I see some cool things, cool different projects on that CV.
I graduated from Bartlett in 2009 for my part 2, and then after that I joined Populous, which used to be known as HOK Sport. They're sports architects, and I joined them as part of the motorsport division. So, like my sort of claim to fame is the pit lane and paddock building for Silverstone. I joined the team at the time when that design was coming through, so I had input on the design for that and the construction phase, as well as the new loop that was added to the circuit. So it was that's kind of like my star project.
I know a certain racing related resident who'd be very interested in that particular one.
Yes, we had chatted briefly about it. So it was funny because, like, going to join them as sports architects, I'm not very sporty. I'm more into sitting in front of a computer and playing games. But I said to them, like, I know the question you're going to ask me is, what sports do you like? And I said, like, well, the only one that I'm really interested in is motorsport, and they gave it to me as an opportunity. So I was like, at first I thought you're just using a hook here, you're trying to catch me, but it turned out to be true. So it was great. So I had 4 years working at Populous, and got also to work on other projects like Singapore F1 proposal for the 2012.
Sorry, I've got some builders outside. Apologies.
That's okay. And one of the other interesting projects that I had then, which was a race for London, it was called, and it was a purely hypothetical race around London, and we got to work with McLaren and Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton to promote Santander through a virtual race, and
Amazing.
I think that was probably the point when I started getting more interested in game engines, and using them in our like day-to-day architectural practice. So it's so funny because you look back on projects which you've done previously, and at the time you think, my God, that's like the most amazing thing ever. And then you look back at it with eyes from the future, and it's always like, maybe that was in my mind's eye that it was so good. But
I think particularly as well with a lot of the digital tools, and particularly when it comes to immersive, some of the things have moved so quickly that it kind of things look amateur in very small amounts of time because everything's moving so quickly.
But we built a model of this fictitious circuit through London along the Mall, and took early like scan geometry from the city. So I know View City is like one of the biggest companies that produce like this scan data at the moment. So they've got large maps of London which are in like incredible fidelity, but at the time when we had it, it was all very sort of blocky. So to get around it, we painted all the buildings red because we didn't have like extensive texture materials. So we're great at post rationalizing things, but we painted it all red and said, oh no, it's Santander branding.
Oh, of course.
We've taken your color scheme, we've incorporated it through everything. So that went down quite well, and it was really good. So and then sort of beyond that, Leeds Arena, I worked on that just before I left Populous, and then came down to Brighton. Nice. And then since being here, which it started off as, I'm going from a practice of like 200 odd people across
huge team,
several continents, down to Brighton it was, we're a practice of 12 people. And I guess at first you think like, oh, am I gonna miss out on the opportunity
to do the big things?
But to be honest, it was exactly the opposite. It's been really good at LCE, and it's because I'm passionate about what it is that I'm doing. I've managed to really push and bring the practice along with me.
Nice. You have a bit more influence over, to be honest.
Yeah, and there's only a few more people that you need to convince of things, which is always great. And I know, with immersive technology, it is one of those things that everybody says it that's in the industry, but you have to experience it to understand it. There's no point in looking at it on a screen. So having fewer heads to cram into headsets, it's a lot easier. But when I started at LCE, one of the first kind of projects that I was working at, which was the Prince Sultan Cultural Centre in Jeddah, which again was like a very large scale project. And this was around the time that the Rift was coming out.
Right.
Well, the first release of the backer DK1s was coming out. My brother was a first backer, so I had access to it, and the cultural centre was like this inverted golden bowl type structure, which looked quite
a very
insane.
well engineered building, I'm sure.
Yeah, incredibly well engineered to look good. And I saw it and thought, do you know what? I wonder what we could do with this. And my brother's in the games industry himself, so he's the expert, as it were. And I just said to him, like, one weekend, I was like, okay, Glenn, look, what can we do? I've got the models. Let's just sit down over a weekend, hack it together. So we had this sort of breaking all the rules of what you do in VR that we know now. You know, like you don't push or translate people through space because it's going to make them sick, and you know all of the things that we've now learned weren't
That
there
wasn't
at the
common
time.
knowledge, was it?
Yeah, so I've tried to look at it again since, and visually, like the fidelity was great. It was using Unreal Engine. I think it was like 4.1. It was like one of the very first Unreal Engine 4 projects that we did. But yes, just going into it again, it's like you feel queasy when you start to suddenly fly up and over this space. But yeah, so we spent the weekend hacking it together. I took it in on Monday, showed it to everybody, and they were like, "Wow, this is brilliant." So we had the client coming over from Jeddah like the week later, and we showed it to them, and you know, within 5 minutes, they were just, "I want this." So I think that was really lucky for me because it gave, you know, proof early on that this was something that was going to be important for us as architects, and I think it's continued to do so.
Sorry, just to check, so people know, I have got a couple of questions in chat, and I'm going to slot them in when we sort of get to the right part. So I'm not ignoring you. I will get to your question in time. Oh.
Is there a question you want?
Okay, well, yeah, actually, we'll jump in. It might be a little bit off topic, but I think it's better to get through them now. So Stephen Harvey from LM Productions in Eastbourne, he was saying, one question, do you think the use of VR and the cost involved equals more wins? Pictures are becoming more and more complex and therefore costly, so does it equate?
I think this is... In the earliest scenario, like the use of VR, you could almost, you know, just putting somebody in a 3D space and giving them a sense of like scale and volume, that was like an easy win, and I think that still applies. But because of the vast amount of work that you have to do to get that fidelity up, I still think there is a place for, you know, the traditional flat images, and it seems strange to me because when I've spoken to some other visualizers that I think we've spoken about this before, Chris, but you know, you're almost in a bubble that's reinforced, and you think that the use of VR is really, really commonplace and that everybody is doing it.
Yeah.
But actually, you'll find that it's still quite niche, even within architecture.
I mean,
it's
8 hours. I'd say it's sort of like, I don't know, maybe now like 50% of the people, probably even 70% of the people you put headsets on haven't tried VR before.
Yeah,
it's still to this day. So it's crazy that you keep seeing these new faces that haven't tried it before and don't understand it.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, the other thing with a static image is that you get to orchestrate carefully, you know, what the what the view is. So, but undoubtedly, the use of VR is such a powerful tool, and I would say that that as the tools have improved, the amount of time and energy taken to produce these higher fidelity images is coming down. So I think we will see a shift to going completely the other way. And I guess it's how people consume it as well. That's the other thing to be mindful of, which is those that don't have access to headsets want a more traditional, you know, image to look at. But then that being said, I know, Chris, with the hubs, those virtual spaces are easily accessible on like many devices. So
yeah. So actually, that leads on to another question, and it's sort of, there's two sides to it. So there's you have the option of visualizing sort of built environments in VR as a standard experience that people can look at. Then there's an option of making it networked and multi-user so people can interact there, and that's what's looking really exciting at the minute. Some of the things people are doing there, and we'll probably come back and talk about some of the multi-user stuff. But then the third approach, which Robin calls out in chat, is how do you feel about shared immersive experiences like an igloo type approach? Have you seen those type of things, particularly in the architecture setting? I don't think I've seen much in the architecture setting for that, but I imagine it's out there.
I think with the igloo product, it's like it's a 360-degree projection space, so you can get groups of people in the middle of like a donut, as it were. So you're all experiencing the visualization at the same time. I think there's definitely a place for those kinds of technologies. I think it's good when you're discussing things in a group, because one of the biggest barriers to entry for VR is, you know, the isolated nature of the headset. The more I've used it, you know, I've seen it becoming less and less of an issue. I think that's just because the more and more you use it, you get
more familiar.
You get more familiar with it, exactly. So I do see the benefit of the igloo system, and especially for you know, like really quick onboarding. So you know, people just come into a space. They don't have to put on any devices or headsets. They can just stand and look around. I do think that it's for very specific situations. I think what it benefits from is allowing groups to look at something together, but I don't feel that it has the same immersion as a headset itself. I mean, it's kind of like you know, a 6 degree of freedom headset. So as you move around, the whole world moves with you. I mean, that is worlds apart from the 3 degrees of freedom, which just allows you to look around. And so I think any other technology which is projection based, unless it's mapping to your physicality, I think there's still like a disconnect there.
I have seen some people starting to tie the domes with omnidirectional treadmills. So once that gets rolling, then hell yeah. 3D glasses, omnidirectional treadmill, and a projection dome. You're not really sharing experiences there. That's definitely a single player moment though. I think it's one of the things I wrote down a note, actually, that, you know, we're in designing like virtual spaces, which can you've got very little restriction on you. You know, there's an infinite canvas beyond what you can produce. You are still physically limited by the space you're in, and I think that's one of the benefits of being up at the Fusebox when it's open is that big event space. You know, being able to walk confidently from one end of the room to another without stepping on the cat, and with the tracking,
bumping into or losing track. Into.
I wanted to ask you about that in particular, because for those who haven't been to the Fusebox before, we have a fairly large event space, which we typically were hosting all our immersive meetups, and these type of events would have all been hosted there. But also, when we pull all the chairs away, we have this really large tracked VR space, which, Gareth, you were starting to do some really interesting experiments with before
so Phil Nutley at the Fusebox and I got chatting, and one of like the side projects at LCE was I was looking at creating digital rooms that you could inhabit with the client. So you've got a shared experience, and then the idea being that you could move some element around, and it would map to the 3D space.
Physically moving objects,
on options and things at the same time.
I love that.
So yeah, we made a quick model of that event space. This was, I think it was towards the end of last year. Phil and I were working on it. We were so close to getting something in there and working, and then Christmas came, and
then not long after that,
and after that, it all kind of like
that's something I'm really looking forward to getting going again, because I remember when they announced the Oculus Quest, they had people playing multi-user shooting games connected together, localized, and that was without the external stuff.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
we can get a mixed reality space where we have our own obstacles and things to move around, I
don't
mean,
think it's far off.
it's such a really, and I think that needs to be a product as well, something standardized and ready to go.
Yeah, I think we were discussing yesterday, weren't we, about hubs and
before we go into hubs, so
sorry.
no, because Katie Lineker's came in with a really interesting question. She works in the visual arts sector, and there's an increasing need for virtual spaces to exhibit and perform. To deliver an experience. Is there an existing platform that would be suitable? She also says, I love the relationship between art and immersive tech, still feels like such a live conversation, which I think is entirely true. And I think what's really nice with immersive tech is as well, it's where business comes in and plays as well a little bit.
Yes.
It's the one place where, gamification is still a buzzword. People are still excited to sort of make it fun as well. So I love that. So I only mention this now because obviously we're about to talk about Mozilla Hubs, which is a cloud-based platform that allows you to interact with other people. Maybe you want to explain it, some of your side with it, and how you found it. I think this could be the answer to Katie's potential question.
Yeah, I've only dabbled in it a little bit recently, but so yes, it's an online hosted virtual spaces that you can create yourself, and you can invite people into it with very little barrier for entry. It's you get a code and you just come into the space, and you can view it on your phone or your desktop or through the headset, and it's I know that Chris, I wasn't able to attend. You did the last meetup.
Yes. I mean, we'll talk about how we can tie it in with the sort of architecture practice as well. But we've had some really good luck hosting events in there, and it's been really interesting to see people joining on all sorts of devices. So you've got people joining in VR headsets and acting, and they've got their hands and they're fully characterized, and then you've got people who can join on their smartphone as well. So when it comes to these virtual spaces, quite often it's also got to be about the trade-off between accessibility and quality, in a way that if you want anyone to be able to join, then it needs to work on any device. So it does depend, and this is where optimization comes quite important, especially if you want to load something architecture related.
Yes, yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that's on my to-do list, which is to try and grab something from our projects and try and get it up onto Hubs.
It's all browser based though, so anything that it has to essentially be able to load on a web page, as far as file sizes don't go, it can't be crazy, so it has to be fairly minimal.
Just briefly, just to say about other products out there. I mean, the thing is, this is mainly architectural rather than I guess arts based. But there's a product called The Wild, which is architecturally focused, and the idea being that you take one of your projects, and it will upload it to a shared space, which it's more of a private subscription based system. So you can come into design reviews and walk around the building. I've had a try with it. It's I think the thing with it, like you say, is the trade-offs, and I think it's the tools that we use to create these models. There's a lot of work I find at the moment that needs to be done, getting your intended model onto these other platforms, and they all promise the one button press, to get it on there. I've yet to find one that's for web. There's a few tools which I know Chris, you mentioned we might talk about the other tools that I use. There's a couple out there which do have the one button promise, that are really good, which I'll mention later. But yeah, in terms of web, I'm still finding that I need to do a lot of manual optimization before I can get it on there. So yes.
And just again for Katie's sake, so with hubs, if you're looking within like a some kind of gallery exhibition you're looking to build, one of the cool things you could do is you could have you can build a virtual art gallery even with the videos, audio, 3D models, photographs, GIFs, sort of all sorts of mixed media content. So you can and make it all accessible via a web page, which is why I think that could be quite interesting to have a look at for you. Got more questions coming in. I've moved off of my list of questions because we keep getting questions come in, and it's just fantastic. There's a couple of people that Andy and Cliff have noticed there might be a slight West Country accent slipping through.
Oh yeah. When I get more relaxed, it starts.
Good. You're comfortable. There we go. That's a good thing. Stephen Harvey was saying, does VR still have issues with motion sickness, and is this related to the speed of the content? I just got to plug my headphones.
I think you will find some people are susceptible to it no matter what you do. I think that's by the nature of it. I think we've learned a lot of lessons over the past 8 years of immersive technology. So it really is since I know that VR existed long before the Rift, but it was that the Oculus that really made it available to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of techniques. Always, trying not to push people through a space. But then there's the tricks that we've learned. Like if you're going to push someone through a space because you need to for the sake of story or just to develop it, vignetting is a really strong, good one. So cropping people's view in.
Yeah,
Foveating it, yeah, exactly. And the other one actually, which I found really useful, which is providing like a frame. You can do it very simply by just putting a square frame in front of you, or creating like a structure around you before you move.
So you're moving in a pod or moving in a mech or
some kind of brain that you're moving within a vehicle, which your brain almost understands. And so that alleviates quite a lot of the sickness.
But I'd say it's still very much there. It's not like the technology's advanced in the way they've fixed it. It's just people have learnt the lessons of early VR devs.
I mean, the other things that you've got is like increased frame rates. Resolution helps to a certain degree, and tracking is like one of the biggest things. I mean, I remember in the DK1 we used to because it was only 3 degrees of freedom, meaning that you can look around, but if you move your head closer or further away, no positional data is transferred. So your brain gets messed up really quickly. I've got to watch my words. Messed up very quickly. So we used to have like DK1 headset on. I think it was a resolution of like 640 by 480 per eye.
Yeah,
it's like,
it was a bit of a stretch. I have one at university actually.
Yeah. And a packet of ginger nut biscuits
for the motion sickness afterwards. Yeah,
because that's one of the biggest things that we would recommend is like have a ginger nut biscuit.
So this is one of the things that I used to talk about quite a lot, and I think it's why in a way the AR companies have been so hesitant to get some of the headsets into the hands of consumers, and that's because the Oculus Rift dev kit came out very quickly, very suddenly, and gave access to VR to loads and loads of people. But it was kind of the same time that all the devs got access to this. So all the original VR experiences that I remember being out there were roller coasters, theme park rides. I actually built a virtual theme park in my dorm room at university, where people come in and do all the theme park rides and get monstrously motion sick because we thought that was what VR was at the time. And the problem is that still damages the reputation of VR today. And I think that's why the AR industry has actually moved quite slowly to consumers, is because they know that if consumers saw it now, this would probably damage the perception of it for years to come, potentially. Yeah. That's my stance.
Yeah, no. I do see. I think with AR, they don't suffer from the same issues like motion sickness. It's very rare that you would get that kind of experience from AR, because the world is still visible there through the device, so that kind of grounds you. So no matter what's happening, like that's overlaid, I think your brain will will understand what's going on, and you probably won't get as many of those issues. But yes, yeah, I have to say that two of the best, actually I've got three standout sort of like instances in my mind for VR, and those were like the first time I put on the Rift, or the DK1, which was the Tuscany demo.
Yeah, I had the same one where you're using a Xbox controller to walk about.
Villa in Tuscany. And actually, again, because my brother's in the industry, he had like all the kit. We had a set of Razer controllers.
Oh, you had the Razer, yeah. The first touch controllers.
It was positionally tracked hands in VR, like on the first dev kit, and you still got really queasy as you were moving around, because it was like still sliding you around the place. But one of the bits that I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, is there's like timber shutters on the windows, and when you had the controllers in your hands, you could kind of bat the window open and close, and it was that interactivity that really got me sort of like excited about it. I was like, oh my god, this is the future now. Second one was the whale in the blue on the HTC Vive. When that whale first comes out.
Oh yeah.
And you feel well, you don't feel it, but your brain tells you you're feeling it.
I think I accidentally traumatized my nan with that one.
Yeah. And then the last one was actually at the Fusebox. I forget the name of the company that came in, but they were demonstrating the Vario headset.
Oh yeah.
The 4K per eye, and the level of fidelity that they achieved. It was a scanned space. It was like an artist studio, I think it was incredible. And those are kind of like the three standout.
And and that's like, with that really is the future of where we can go with the really high resolution renders and things. And that's like the super high end, maybe less accessible, but very much this is like in the million or billion dollar bills. This is the way to do it, I'm certain. I think my standout moment, there's one moment you didn't mention there, and it's something which I want to talk about, and that's Google Earth VR. I think the first time I tried Google Earth VR, that was probably the most astonishing moment for me ever in VR. Because suddenly you're looking at most of the world's 3D models and laid out in front of you, which is a huge amount of data, a huge amount of knowledge of our world, and just being able to see it like it's a toy city underneath you, and walking around the buildings and seeing the scale of everything being right. How does those type of technologies tie in? Because I remember we had a building developer come in, and I showed them Google Earth, and within a week they'd hired someone to actually demo Google Earth VR in their lobby to show people all their buildings around the world, because it was a 3D model that had already been generated for them, basically.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean Google Earth on its own is like an incredible tool. Like I know it's even better experienced in VR. But we do tend to use it sort of like maybe at least once a week in practice. So and their 3D data is incredible as well, and it's free accessible. So I think actually for us, or one of the things that I continually look out for, and in fact I'm probably going to Google it as soon as we finish this, it might be that it's out now, is getting our models, our architectural models, from either Revit or SketchUp into Google Earth. So you can do it currently on the desktop version. So we can put all of our models into Google Earth, and we do use it to kind of like
check sightlines and things as well.
Sightlines, which is a great one, and also just seeing how the building works with the urban grain. It's like to get that overview is really useful. But it's like on my tick list always. I'm like, have they integrated it with Google VR yet? And that's for me is like
some sad. I think from what I heard from when we had someone from Google in is that the Google Earth VR team there isn't a Google Earth VR team anymore.
Yeah.
Which is such a shame because it really is I'm going to start mentioning this every single time I do this just to try and petition it to happen and be fixed because it's a travesty. It's one of the best VR tools out there. So
yeah, I mean, I love I did like the classic ones of like going up Everest, but also just going to places that I've been to on holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife, her parents live in Greece on the island of Crete, and we went in Google Earth to the port there, and like stood outside the restaurant where we would normally have our like evening meal. And even though when you get down to the ground, it's kind of like a little bit jelly mold still.
Yeah.
With the textures, but it's still so compelling.
I love going the 1-to-1 scale and actually looking at everything like you're there. I remember I used it quite extensively when I was looking for places when I was moving, trying to find places. Right. And you could just check if that view really is as good as it looks like in the pictures.
Yeah,
that's power.
Yeah, I think you've got to be lucky as well. I mean, it can only improve, and their sort of data set can only ever expand. But it's like when we're using it, you'll find areas where Google doesn't deem it quite so important as other areas, and they don't get all of the 3D data for you.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think in Brighton and Hove it's an absolutely brilliant model. In fact, well, most of the UK is, but there's still some pockets out there where they've only got 2D satellite information, and it's a little bit of a downer when you get to a place and you're back home and you're like, oh, my house isn't as important as somebody else.
I remember that one of the executives from this particular building development agency that came in was very upset when like his block of flats that he owned wasn't in 3D, and he was trying to find like a way to contact Google to get them to fix it. And I was like, you're just gonna have to hire I suppose it's no issue. Hire some chartered flights over London. It's easy. He was like he literally was right on the border of London where it went from 3D to 2D, and I remember that being a pain point. Now I've got a couple of questions, and they seem to line up roughly on. Could you do you know any examples of immersive tech being used in architecture already, outside of your I feel like it's still quite early days and there's a lot of tinkering, but maybe we can talk about the tools, and that might be a good way to sort of segue into that.
I mean, I know.
What do you use?
A lot of the larger London practices, they've got sort of dedicated teams within their companies that are developing it. I know the Unity conference that was earlier this year, they were showcasing Unity Reflect, which is like a subset of the Unity program that allows you to bring your architectural models straight into it. Which
that'd have been useful to know about.
Shop architects, they kind of showcase their work, and they're really one of the architects that are at the forefront of using immersive tech within it. But speaking from our own sort of use, we use to create our models, we use Autodesk tools, so Revit, which is a BIM, building information management bit of software. So we build all of our buildings using Revit now since about 2015 that we've started doing it. And the benefit of that is you can still work sort of traditionally in 2 dimensions, like drawing out your plans and your elevations, but you get a 3D model out from the same time. And then with that you can then get that into VR. So there's a few tools that I would shout out for. Our first one that we kind of got into was one called Iris VR, which was a plugin for Revit, which I think what you'll find with a lot of these tools, so Iris VR, and there'll be a couple of others, they tend to plug into all of like the major platforms. So those being Revit, Rhino, I think ArchiCAD, and SketchUp, which is another big one, which everybody tries to integrate with those specifically.
Any in particular that stand out? What's the
verdict?
verdict?
I mean, the verdict is Enscape. Enscape 3D are, to my mind, the best tool at the moment. They provide the best tool for getting your models from the drawing board or from your other software into VR. Actually, maybe beyond this, we can post up a bunch of links to like, the different software tool sets that I use.
I think if anyone has, we'll talk about how to get in touch at the end, but if anyone has any sort of further questions after this and wants to know more, drop me an email at fusebox@wiredsussex.com, and I'll try and make certain we get everyone in touch and answer any questions left over.
Yeah, so I mean, we went from Iris VR, which was very good, and then we got introduced to Enscape, and I think what they balance really well is like a level of fidelity and ease of use. Is going back to what I was saying about the one-click solution. They really do have a one-click solution to get your projects into VR. It is dependent on your machine. I think that's the one thing we should still highlight is
these are high-end renders.
Yeah, you definitely need a high-end desktop to be doing it. But so we, as a practice, we do use VR for like the glossy images, to sell projects to people, but also what I've tried to do within the practice is to make it our mantra to use all of the tools available to us at every stage of design. So even on like the earliest massing concept models, we'll still look to jump into VR at like the earliest opportunity to get a sense of scale, and to really share that experience with other designers within the practice. So one of our like success stories, which I actually presented back in 2018 at the Fusebox, was Bede's School in Hailsham.
So I was going to ask about this one.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to design a boarding house for a school, which was I think it was for 60 students, and it had an atrium, and we had like our initial model and some initial sketches, and then we got it into Revit and 3D, into VR pretty quickly, and we really took the opportunity to get the students that were going to be using the space to come into the office. So I think we had about 7 or 8 students, ranging in age from, I think the youngest was about 12 and the eldest was about 16, 17.
I'm sure quite excitable about trying VR as well.
But, we get to have a day off school to come in and play with VR, and I think it was a Vive.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah, first Vive, and putting them all in, and then really getting them to explore and understand the spaces and make suggestions to us.
Yeah,
at the earliest stage. So from that, we had like some great interactions, and they really took ownership of the building before it was even,
they went, we don't want that, or we want this.
It was a case of like, oh wow, imagine what we can hang up over here, because they like to hang artwork on the walls of like the atrium space and what have you. So it was really good.
That's awesome.
And that informed then for us exactly what we were going to be producing further down the line.
I remember there was something about a corner as well.
So that was on the
because that's really interesting.
Yeah, so we had an entranceway coming into the boarding house, and then we had like a spiral stair that was going up, and we were kind of looking at it on plan and agonizing about where we should place this stair core, relative to the entrance. And it's like, oh, should we place it here? Well, yeah, there's no technical reason why we couldn't do that. And then, let's have a look over here. and we said like, okay, look, let's just jump into the model and have a look. And as soon as you stepped into the model and you got to the doorway and you came in, as it first was designed, you know, the stair core was like smack bang in the middle of like where you naturally would look into this big atrium space, and it completely destroyed the view. And from, you know, being 5 minutes in VR and just being able to do that, you know, it's not realizing it until you kind of just shift your head slightly, like what opportunities
get that human scale to it.
Exactly. Within 5 minutes we were like, oh, okay. It didn't shut down the conversation. It kind of like, it just brought it to a head really quickly, and said like, okay, we're going to move that, we're going to put it over there. And then everybody's bought in. I think that's what we've used it for mostly within the office, is like getting consensus between designers, and also, you know, like general public as well. A lot of our stuff that we try to do is to build models to for planning purposes. I think that's where the cost kind of benefit really lies, is if you construct your models, instead of creating, you know, static views, which traditionally you would, which you still have to put a lot of effort into, you always get some smart person say, oh, what does it look like on the other side of the road?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, that'll be another 4 or 5 days of us going out, getting a camera, setting it up, re-rendering, compositing, and then giving it back to you. So what we've taken to now is to create models that have enough fidelity that you get the sense of scale and sense of place, that you're there, but maybe not necessarily
like photorealism.
For realism. But that's primarily down to, you know, budget, which is always a driver of what you're producing, and also like the hardware and technology. But I have to say, actually, oh sorry Chris, I was just going to say that just talking about tools, that I've predominantly used Unreal Engine for mine, only because my brother, being in the industry, is a bit of a pro on it, so I always had a
he had a wizard
call to. I know a lot of the people at the Fusebox use Unity,
including myself.
But with the last tech demo that was presented for the Unreal Engine, hopefully my hope is that it's going to reduce the amount of optimization that's needed from our architectural models putting into the Unreal Engine. And so hopefully that will change in terms of how we're creating our planning models, that we can use the original like point cloud or data capture more easily.
I've just linked it in the chat, the demo, because it's so spectacular. And some of the optimization it can almost do natively that might make life so much easier as well. One of the things that I'm actually just wanted to mention was when you're viewing sort of models and things in VR, one of the things you can do is if you change your height, that changes the whole perspective that you're looking at something from. So it's quite interesting that before, quite often there would, you know, you'd have a building that was designed and you'd find that anyone over 6'1" would smack their head on a metal piece of rebar that was just hanging a tiny bit too low, or that someone who was too short couldn't see over a certain line of sight point or something. That's actually something I don't know if you've experimented with, but you can have a single person sort of not fully test for every case, but you can sort of come up with a range of people that it would be accessible for and you can test with much easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I've had it, I guess, accidentally on a few projects where I've booted up the space and come in, and for some reason, you know, I've recalibrated the space and I've come in too high or too short relative to like my own height. So I have had that happen. What we've found is, you know, because we've got varying heights of people within our office, designers, so it's like different people going into those spaces will have different perspectives on it.
Exactly.
Which I think is great. I think it's always good to test, you know, in somebody else's shoes, as it were, to see what experience they're having. but I think the the one-to-one nature of it means that you can get everybody's take,
Yeah.
because like you say, with a static image, it is just that, it's static, and
It's up to whoever made it.
yeah, exactly. So I think with the use of these immersive technologies, we can get a like a wider
Mm-hmm.
set of data to work from.
I've got quite a few questions I want to sort of whistle through because we're running out of time, and yeah, there's just a few things I want to talk about. Some of one thing is there anyone from the Fusebox that you want to shout out? So some of the people that you've worked with and any of the cool projects that you've sort of done as an offshoot. Because
thank you. That's
there you
really
go.
good.
Set up.
Big shout out is to Nemesine and Ed and Sophie at the Fusebox. They were kind of like the first people that I met when I was there, and it's now, well, I mean, even before I joined the Fusebox in 2018 when I actually joined, but even before then I met them at Fusebox events, and they've been phenomenal because they've opened my eyes to web VR and those technologies.
Yeah.
So we've had opportunity to work on a few little hack days and projects together, which has expanded my knowledge immensely. So yeah, big shout out to them.
I miss having Ed around because I've never been so excited about web XR tech.
Yeah.
And now the Fusebox isn't open, I can't go and talk to Ed about it every day.
and really to everybody, because I mean, like I've had really good opportunity to work with a whole bunch of people. So Phil Nutley, as I say, Andy Baker, Math J, I've worked a few little bits and pieces on. I'm forgetting people's names.
I've put you on the spot now. Yeah, that's not fair. No, lots of other people.
Yeah, and everybody else that's at the Fusebox. I think the best thing, the reason why I love the Fusebox space the most, is the fact that you really can just walk around the space, have a chat with people, and it sparks, those little side projects that otherwise you just talk to yourself about. It's and to be honest, that actually having the people with the skills there. I mean, I've been doing it since 2012, and all my stuff that I've worked on has been sort of self-taught, and I kind of teach myself enough to get through and to get that thing working. So the biggest benefit is actually being able to speak to people and to get that one-on-one.
Yeah. You always know doing it yourself. You always know the stuff in the back of your mind that's out of your own reach, and suddenly, because I found it as well. Even though I work there, I've found that there's so many ideas and things that I've had that I would love to see happen, but I know I could never do. And then there's people in the Fusebox who are just experts and can give you the answers.
Exactly. I think my worst thing is that I chat with people and I come up with an idea and I'm like, oh man, but what if we did this? And it's like, it goes from like this really simple thing, like with Phil and I, where we were just going to try and pass a box to one another in 3D space. And it's become...
And now you're 3D modeling the whole environment.
Let's model the whole thing. Let's reconfigure how space works whilst we're moving through it. And it's, yeah. So, but it's good to have those conversations. It's always like aim high and...
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Last question before we wrap up. How has like the architecture practice been affected by the lockdown? And is this like a moment for immersive tech? Is this or is it kind of just going to carry on business as usual and get going again?
Yeah, I mean, for our office, I think the week before the lockdown, we were kind of had it in the back of our minds. So we've our office is running essentially. We all just sat at home. Working rather than in the office in Brighton. With Immersive, I think it could be, I've found with the few interactions that I've had, like I didn't really do much social VR stuff before. It's always been sort of like quite singular experiences.
But it's a nice idea, but people never really did it.
Yeah,
what I found.
And with the lockdown, it's kind of forced us to experiment, and like you've got no excuse.
Yeah, and take it seriously. Yeah.
where are you
You
going to
can't
go?
say I'm busy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it could build quite rapidly, but it's getting the tech into people's hands, and getting their buy-in, which is hampered by the lockdown, by the current situation. Because obviously, like sharing of headsets is obviously a no-no, and so people have to invest themselves in the technology, and I think the price has definitely come down. I mean, I'm recommending Quests to
Yeah,
to
I feel
everyone,
like a salesman. I need a cut.
Yeah,
Commission.
exactly. I did feel that way. I mean, like I did the same with the Vive when I first got my Vive.
I mean, I actually have mine like ready to go here, so I can show it to people on video calls because people are
Yeah,
always asking about them.
yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, and I think as it continues, I think beyond beyond the lockdown. I mean, I know that our practice is sort of very keen on retaining like some of the. It doesn't feel like freedom at the moment, but some of the freedom to work from home. But to still have those meetings happen.
yeah.
And again, I think it goes back to that hubs, which it's been really interesting, to get a sense of like spatial audio and actually inhabiting the same space
And have a
at the same
team
time.
meeting in the building that you're planning and discussing at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh, so and actually, thank you for prompting me. So the biggest thing at the moment that we're dealing with is public consultation. So this is how it's affecting our industry. Is normally you would go to your local library. We would have several boards that explain what potential project is going to be built in your area to get like the comments of local residents. And now everybody, or architects as it were, are trying to find how do we do this. So most people at the moment, and us included, we're looking at approaching it from a slightly more traditional view of a website where they can look at all the information, and then hosting like a webinar where we could maybe have some one-to-one FaceTime with people. But it's definitely in the back of my mind about potentially putting on a hubs space to engage with the public, like one-to-one, and sort of very meta, you could meet the people in the lobby of the building that you're proposing for them to have built next to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's happening. I think everyone was a little bit caught by surprise by what sort of by lockdown, having to very quickly do things, and now people are starting to tinker and starting to think, well, let's make this a bit better then, shall we?
Yeah, I think that's it. And again, it's this fine balancing act, where you don't want to do something that's so radical that it puts people off. So yeah, it very much is a balancing act, but that's something in the back of my mind for the next project, as it were.
Well, perfect. I think that's sort of got through all the questions that everyone had here and all the ones I had pre-prepared. So perfect. I just want to say, before we do sort of ways to get in touch, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who joined us to watch today, and a big thank you to Gareth. We've had some fantastic questions. So Cliff, Stephen, Andy. I mean, Andy was going on about accents. Katie and Robin. Thank you so much for your questions. It's been fantastic to actually have people engaging with these. Gareth, if people want to find out more about you, is there a best way just to go through LCE?
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, you can get in touch with me at gareth.evans@lcearch.com. I do have a Twitter account somewhere, but I'm not really into the social media at the moment. I know it's something I need to.
Don't blame me for hiding at the minute.
Yeah, I still, a little bit of a social butterfly. Or not. So yeah, so mainly through the website or lcearch.com. You can contact me through there.
Excellent.
Or through
so if you just if you want me to pass a message on to Gareth or sort of connect you, Fusebox@wiredsussex.com. If you email me there, I'll get you in touch and we'll